It's time for Supply Chain Now. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to the show. We are broadcasting live once again from MODEX, the largest supply chain trade show in the Western Hemisphere, and it's being held right here in Supply Chain City, Atlanta, GA. Now, on today's show, we're speaking with one of the senior leaders from an incredible professional association that has been making a global impact for years. So stay tuned as we look to increase your supply chain IQ. Quick programming note, like all of our podcasts here at Supply Chain Now, you can find our replays and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. And we encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. All right, so let's welcome in my fearless co-host here today, Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, trusted advisor, and evidently the world's biggest fan of Gandy Dancer. Greg, how you doing?
I am doing well. Yes.
Great to see you this morning.
As soon as we found out John was from Pittsburgh, that's the first place I mentioned, of course, a bar.
That makes you the biggest fan in the world of Gandy Dancer in the Pittsburgh area, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned you kind of let the cat out of the bag. So our featured guest here today, we're really delighted to have John Paxton back with us. John serves as COO and CEO Designate for MHI, Material Handling Industry. That's MHI, of course, the powerful team behind MODEX and ProMat. John, good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
It is great to have you back.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed our conversation a few months back up in Charlotte where MHI is headquartered, and we had a chance to sit down with both you and a couple others and really enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about you and what MHI does. And now we get to refresh our memory there, but also pick your brain on some of the key takeaways from MODEX 2020 this week.
Great.
So we are going to dive right in. So, we want to kind of want to start with tell us about where you're from and give us a story or two from your upbringing.
Yeah, you're about to be right. I mean, you're already right there at the top, but I mean, you're about to be, as if you don't already need a vacation from this show, right? You're about to be the person in charge of this thing. So,
yeah, that's correct. I actually grew up in Pittsburgh, and through that, I was a hockey player, and I was going off to say, where am I going to take my hockey skills? And took those to Ohio State, and played club hockey there for several years. And
very cool.
And through that, I realized that perhaps hockey wasn't going to be the future, but it was. I went there and studied engineering, and went off and started my first job at Demag Cranes.
So before we leave hockey, what position on the hockey team did you play?
I was right wing.
Right wing.
Yeah, yep.
And I am going to show you my complete ignorance when it comes to hockey, but that's an offensive scoring position, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your best scoring season? I don't know if because we track points, goals, and assists or points, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think in my junior year in high school, I think I had about 25 goals.
Wow.
Okay. So, yep. So,
nice.
Man.
Yep. But
and
that goes way back.
Hockey is serious business in Pittsburgh.
It's come a long way, and when the Penguins started winning Stanley Cups, then it really built the youth hockey program there, and it's developed great since then.
Yeah.
All right, so you mentioned kind of getting past hockey once you graduated. What organization did you join?
Yeah, so I went to Demag Overhead Cranes, and that was actually up in Cleveland, and first role was to write software to automatically design cranes. And back then, that was kind of high tech, but nothing near what you see today.
Is that similar to a CAD type technology?
Yeah.
What you'd call CAD today?
Yeah, well, CAD, but programming CAD automatically. So you didn't have to draw it. It actually automatically drew drawings and set it up depending on what your inputs were.
Wow.
So not to get too basic, but we might have some listeners that haven't been through a facility, a manufacturing plant, or otherwise that uses overhead cranes. Describe some of the applications back then for the overhead crane.
Yeah, so overhead cranes, basically anything in the manufacturing plant and sometimes in warehousing or particularly at the shipping points.
Right.
If you're lifting and moving product, overhead cranes come in play along with hoists. And what you'll find is it starts at a capacity of anything someone can't lift. So that could be 50 pounds, 100 pounds. But then where the overhead cranes really come in are some of the very heavy capacities. So I tell the story often when people ask, what do you lift? I say, do you ever drive down the road and see one of those coils of steel on the back of a truck? And usually you don't drive behind that because you're not sure if those chains are going to hold.
Yeah.
Those weigh about 30 tons, and that would be kind of a key area for overhead cranes. Supplying manufacturing operations.
All right.
So anywhere from 50 pounds to 60,000 pounds or more.
Or more. Yeah.
Wow.
They go even heavier. Yep.
So from the overhead crane, you said it was Demag?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
So kind of forward from there, kind of fill in any other key roles before you joined MHI. What were some of those key roles that kind of helped shape your worldview?
Yeah, so at Demag Cranes, I had a lot of opportunity to get involved in outside sales, operations, and also product management, and ultimately ended up being the president of Demag Cranes for North America. And so we had we had several manufacturing facilities and also a large service contingency going out and servicing overhead cranes in the field.
I bet it's really important. When I think of overhead cranes and other heavy equipment like that, I think of big generators. I think of big dump trucks at Maine.
These days.
Yeah. Big things that if they go down, it stops the operation. So I'm assuming from a service standpoint, you knew exactly where all of your products were and could get a team on the ground pretty quickly if the overhead crane went down.
Yeah, that's correct. And from a service, to be effective in service, you need to be within 2 hours of all of your customers. So we had 45 locations around the U.S. and Canada, and so we were there, and someone would call and immediately dispatch a technician.
So you went from engineer to president. What's the time span there? That's a pretty impressive leap by any measure. Right?
Yeah, so the first 15 years I had many different roles in the organization, and then for the last 15 years I had the president's role.
Wow.
Okay, man. And then from there, is that when you joined MHI?
So we were a member company of MHI, and MHI is made up of about 800 member companies, and it really it's the volunteers of the member companies that really provide the power for the association. So I was a volunteer for the organization, and I always describe it as the more you volunteer, the better, the more things you're asked to volunteer for.
Yeah.
But in any case, through the course of getting involved in the association and seeing the value of it, I was the president of the Crane Manufacturers Association, the Monorail Manufacturers Association, and the Hoist Manufacturers Association, and then went through the chairs of the MHI board and finished as the CEO of MHI's board. Yeah.
So do you have twins that helped you carry out these duties?
Yeah, there's 24 hours in a day.
That's right. Use them all.
But seriously, I found that with the volunteer work, though you put in extra time volunteering, you got so much more back. With the connections, the contacts, the things you learned about the industry. It was amazing what you learned by the volunteer work that you did.
Excellent point. And, you know, as a member of a variety of associations, professional associations going back almost 20 years, you know, to any of our listeners, you know, there's such a great wealth of resources and connections you can make, business deals you can close, and it's all directly proportional, regardless if it's MHI or any others. It's directly proportional, what I've found, to what you put into it, right? So many folks in some of the associations I've been part of, they join, and it's like, okay, come to me, and it doesn't work like that. You've got to, like you mentioned, you got to get involved. You got to showcase your leadership bandwidth and capabilities and make things happen, and that's really where you begin to benefit.
I think what's interesting about what you said, too, is that, you know, I learned this in college. You know, if you're in an organization, you give work to the people who are already busy, because the inertia of that person already being in action and being someone who takes action already exists. And it is amazing how the work gets piled on somebody who's already busy, but somehow that person is able to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Good point.
Look, I think that's a great life lesson for people, whether you are a leader or a member, as you're talking about, of these kind of groups. Get busy. Get more opportunity, display your leadership capabilities more, and it's a great, you know, it's a teachable moment for you. It helps you learn to be a leader, and it starts to display that leadership as well.
Deeds, not words.
There you go.
And that's what we meant to finish up the other day at our Atlanta Supply Chain Awards. That was a phrase that eluded me.
Oh.
But yeah, it's such an important.
It was still, the way you said it was still eloquent.
Okay.
So you know.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we've
Back to you, John.
So, John, we've talked a lot about MHI. Let's, for the three people out there in our audience that may be unfamiliar with what MHI does, in a nutshell, what is the MHI organization?
Yeah, so MHI is it's a trade association made up of member companies that really focus their production of their products and services in the material handling, warehousing, distribution, and manufacturing space. So to make it real simple, I describe it as if you ordered something online and it came to your door, there's a 100% chance that one of our members or many of our members had something to do with getting that product to you.
Yeah.
So so with the member companies, what the association does, or we call it the why of the association, is we provide a unique platform or that a unique community that the members and users can engage with, and ultimately their engagement leads to prosperity. So it's a unique community where members and users can engage so that they prosper. That's kind of what we're all about.
And you mentioned 800 companies or members globally?
Yep.
Wow, okay. And clearly here with MODEX as the backdrop, of course, ProMat, 99% of folks have heard about those shows. Huge gathering. It's usually on everybody's radar because it alternates, right? MODEX is 1 year here, typically in Atlanta, and ProMat in Chicago the next year, back and forth. And as we've experienced this week, it's a place to be in supply chain, right? Deals happen. You meet connections. You exchange best practices.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of what we're seeing at MODEX this year is even the exhibitors are starting to get together. And I know this happens. It's just that because we're sitting where we are, we're actually watching it happen, watching exhibitors interact with one another and formulate partnerships.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so ProMat. Today, this is day 4 of MODEX. This is the first of our interviews from day 4. It'll wrap up today. A good show, and then I'm sure the team's probably already planning ProMat. Clearly, you got dates. I imagine in short order, you move right on to the next year's planning. But that will be in April in Chicago, correct?
That's
April
correct, yeah.
2021.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Before we leave MHI, anything else, as folks are, considering what organizations to get involved in or, the whys of getting, what to get involved in, anything else you would like to share about MHI before we kind of move into the key takeaways about MODEX?
Yeah, so MHI, when I talked about the unique community, underneath that, there's really 4 core pillars that we call our pillars of value, and the first one is knowledge. So MHI looks at and to be the knowledge leader, the authoritative resource, and to bring that knowledge from our members out where people can access it. Ways we do that, and we have an annual industry report, which is a survey of over 1,000 users about the latest trends. This year we published the next in a roadmap series is what will the supply chain look like in the next 10 years and beyond. So that is just rolled out. So we provide the knowledge component, and then with that our members also provide the knowledge component so that people can make better business decisions. So that's one key pillar. The next one, what you had spoke about earlier, is the connections, is the platform that even competitors can get together, users can get together, and we make those connections in the industry and the networking that these are things that you can't do on your own, not necessarily at this scale. And then a big part, what you're here today at MODEX, a big part of what we do is we provide market access. So market access is bringing the users together, and in this case in MODEX we had 30,000 people registered to come to this show, and bringing them together with the manufacturers and providing the access to the supply chain market. That's a big role that we play, not only here in person but also at a digital level. And then the final piece of the 4 pillars is what we describe as industry leadership, and that is where groups get together. We have 16 industry groups, and they develop standards for the industry. They develop safety safety information, they provide operator manuals, they provide best practices, and these type of things are set to make the industry a better place to do business. So those are the 4 pillars that we provide value under this community.
It's a big responsibility. It's good to pull it together like that. So this organization was created by the members, created for the members, as you said earlier, largely guided by the members, right?
That is correct. So actually, this year we're celebrating our 75th anniversary.
Wow!
And it started really way back 75 years ago as logistics and supply chain as it related to the war effort. So it was brought together so that they could help facilitate companies working in those areas. And there was a trade show, though a very small trade show, but people could come and see the latest technologies. Fast forward 75 years, what you see now on display at MODEX is the complete supply chain.
Yeah.
So, one of the things you touched on as you're walking through those pillars is, be able to make connections and be able to find resources for your global supply chain. As crazy as it sounds, this is my experience, and certainly this is something we've seen in the 300-plus episodes we've had here at Supply Chain Now. Even in this highly digital Google era where everything is, a Google search away, folks still struggle to find certain resources for certain problems and challenges related to growth or other challenges in supply chain, in global end-to-end supply chain. And so being able to have a body like MHI, a global body like MHI, to help you find these connections to help grow, it's critical. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely critical. Google solves a lot of challenges, but you still got to find the right people, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so I want to move along to MODEX 2020. As Greg and I were sharing before we went live on today's show, we've had a great week. This booth 4970 has not been busier, I don't think, right? This has been a great place. Learned a ton of things from a variety of, whether they're entrepreneurs or already technology leaders or part of big Fortune 50 companies or, all points in between. John, from your point of view, what's been some of your key takeaways from this MODEX 2020?
Yeah, so the first thing that if people attended the show, they would see the technology. So you see robotics and automation, and really it's the cutting edge of what's going on in the supply chain. So if you see the technology and some really interesting products, I'm always amazed every time I come to one of our shows, the new things that are developed and how far they've come in just a year's time. So examples, several shows back, you just started to see robotics in the supply chain, robotic picking. And then the last show, you started to see, hey, they're figuring out with how to grab items. And then they're putting vision systems on the robots.
Right.
And then they're putting machine learning on the robots. And before you know it, you have a complete automated picking system that can pick multiple sizes, multiple shapes. It knows when something's not in the right place. And it has evolved and developed. So that's one area from the technology point of view. And then the other area that you'll see is all the different products. We talk in manufacturing and supply chain about workforce and workforce shortage and how do you get people to do the work. And the products that you'll see out here are really designed at making people's lives easier as far as cutting down on the distance people have to move, bringing product to people, helping them with cobotics, for example, working side by side, and it's working on that workforce part of it. And it's not only the technology of moving it; it's you'll see things on the floor about how to train your employees, how to get them up to speed quicker. You'll see things about gamification to make their jobs more interesting, and so it's all about the workforce. How do you enhance and enable and simplify the things that the workforce is doing? So that's the second piece. And then MODEX, when we originally set out and said what type of a show are we going to develop, MODEX was launched in 2012. And the idea with MODEX was we want to go outside the four walls and really look at the broader supply chain. So that brings in transportation. So you'll see transportation companies here. You'll see the connectivity and the visibility. So the software providers that provide access to where are my parts, where are my items, how is my supply chain working, along with all the technology and the product side and the traditional technologies. Traditional technologies, racking, storage systems, mezzanines, you need those too.
Yep.
But what you'll see and what MODEX put on display this week was the entire supply chain. And that is something that we've been continuing to develop. MODEX started with 500 exhibitors, basically 5 shows ago, and now we're up over 900.
Wow.
And it just continues to expand.
Well, and it's an important thing to see all this brought together, because we can't afford in the supply chain to have silos anymore. Everything is so interactive, and finally there is the data available to enable that integration between various levels and types of supply chain solutions and technologies.
That's correct. And now one interesting thing that was going on at this time is the coronavirus. So that was a big topic of what's happening every day. Now it's evolving. Every day there's new information coming out.
Yep.
And what the discussion centered around is the impact on the supply chain. What should companies be doing? How should they be reacting to this? And so we've had also educational topics along those lines. But putting all your eggs in one basket, putting your supply chain all with one supplier or with one region, is now showing that it may be the most cost-effective way, but it is not. The risk is still in play, and we're starting to see that play out. So this week was a dynamic week with that topic, and but I do see there'll be learnings coming out of it. There'll be understandings, and people and companies will look at their supply chain, and in addition to looking at the cost of supply chain, they'll also be looking at the risk and the diversification and the resiliency and the ability to pivot in these particular situations.
Right.
So that was a key topic on the floor this week.
Speaking of resiliency, one of the subject matter experts that y'all brought in to discuss coronavirus and other risks associated with global supply chain was David Shillingford, chairman of Resilience 360. We had a chance to sit down with David earlier this week.
Right.
Fascinating. Not only is their platform, but just his depth of knowledge. And it reminded, once again, reasons to come out to a in-person trade show. To have access to that, be able to pose questions and have sidebar conversations with folks that know this stuff, know more stuff. They forget more stuff in their sleep than I certainly will ever know in my lifetime.
Well, David lives that risk every day. I mean, he and his company live to solve that. So they're looking at it in a way, even if you are the most prepared of companies, you can't be as prepared as a company who does that for a living.
That's right.
Right.
Okay, and we heard a lot of great feedback about not only a variety of sessions, but that session, I think that was Tuesday morning that you had that panel. We heard
Women in Supply Chain.
Women in Supply Chain. Heard a ton about that. We heard a lot about the Archie Manning and Peyton Manning. The social night, I think, was last night. One of the comedians.
Colin
Yost.
Yeah.
So it's been.
Was he really funny?
Yeah, he was very good. Yeah.
Was he about? Did he make jokes about supply chain?
Yes, he did actually. So, he one joke that I thought was rather clever was he thought when he came here that MODEX was the pill to cure coronavirus. But the supply chain might just be the thing that gets us through that.
Yeah. You know what? So kidding aside, because we have touched on this probably through 3 or 4 shows this week, we believe that supply chain that has a seat at the table unlike ever before was almost born to address issues like we're seeing. I mean, the know-how, the problem-solving, the technology, especially these days because supply chain is technology, the practical application, how we take action, leadership. I mean, we are going to help solve this problem. There's no doubt in my mind. But anyway.
Well, John, you said it. You just said it.
Yeah.
Right. All other things being equal, the strategy to go for low-cost providers in a particular region of the world where this may have begun, on paper looks good. But the truth is, I think we will we will in the future say very infrequently, all other things being equal, because I don't think all other things will be equal for a good time to come. It's not a matter of whether there will be disruptions. It is the supply chain is so intertwined and it is so international that there will inevitably be disruptions, and you have to provision for a disruption and then respond based on what that disruption is. I mean, we're coming towards hurricane season this fall, right? So, about the time this virus hopefully is, if it's flu-like, starts to diminish as we get out of season for that, it'll be hurricane season. And
it's just what's next.
Then winter, there will always be those things. And because we are so, it's a double-edged sword. Because we are so dependent on one another, because there are no silos, then we have to provision for those kind of disruption.
Yeah, and in the panel discussion with David, the topic was, you need to look at it and say, what if? What if? And we talked about that, and some of it would seem far-fetched when you start asking that question, but I can tell you what we're seeing today, it's not far-fetched.
Right.
What if, China can't ship products, for example? What if the ports on the West Coast can't receive products?
Right.
So it's
Don't you think there are a bunch of industrial engineers and supply chain analysts sitting around going, "I told you"? Right?
It's easy to say it in hindsight.
But
not many people would be predicting it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and
even though David and some of the guys on the panel said this shouldn't have been a surprise.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
That's right. And just in the last 24 hours, of course, it'll be a few weeks old before we publish this episode. We've seen some things that have taken place for the first time ever. The NBA has either
suspended
postponed,
their season.
at least suspended their season because of an illness, a virus. Spring football games have been canceled for the first time for these reasons, and probably
no fans at the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, no fans, first time ever. This is all things will pass, right? So we'll just kind of
so.
That's right. So we'll keep driving here, though. Coronavirus, it's been a backdrop. It's played a role in a lot of the conversations we've had, and we will manage and move forward. Speaking of moving forward, John, so my understanding from a time frame standpoint is you step into the CEO's office, succeeding George Prest at the end of the year. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
So, I really enjoyed sitting down when we met first time in Charlotte a few months back. I had the same opportunity with George. Really appreciated, especially his entrepreneurial background. That speaks volumes to me. We were able to kind of bond a bit on that. Really enjoyed our time, kind of getting a sense of his tenure as CEO and kind of his outlook on the world and some things he wanted to do. I'd love to get a sense of what your vision is moving forward, 2021 and the years ahead. What are some of the things you'd like to get done?
Yeah. So as I talked earlier, or spoke earlier with the four key pillars of value, what we're looking and what I'm looking to do is bring the digital component on top of those four pillars. So if you think about what's going on in our industry with automation, with AI and analytics and all these type of things, for MHI to continue to play a role as a thought leader in that area, we need to be at the top of our game in the digital world. So we're doing heavy investment in that area in personnel. We're building out a team to really take our association to the next level from a digital point of view and a digital connection point of view. So that layers on top of the four pillars that I spoke about. And then in addition, as the pillars, the example of the industry leadership is to continue to add additional pieces to that. Right now we have 16 industry groups, and we're in discussions of the next industry group will be automatic identification and scaling and dimensioning, and that's a key part that is developing very rapidly, and we'll form a group around that to communicate the latest technologies and what's going on in the industry to help that piece advance. And then there are other products, some we don't even know about, but we have a platform that as they come available, we can continue to build out the umbrella. And then from the connection side, we're looking to really provide deeper connections into the companies. So not only the engineers, not only the business leaders, but we have a community now with marketing professionals. We're putting a community in place for HR professionals and also students. So we're really looking to deepen our value that we can provide to our member companies. And I mentioned the students. One thing at MODEX that we kind of skipped over was student days.
Right.
And that is where we have this year we had 200 students come in, either CTE students and or students from universities, and we introduce them to the supply chain, and we do development for them, and we also make the connection of them to our member companies.
Yeah.
So that was something from a connection point of view.
Well, that makes me think about one other thing you did as a leadership organization. You hosted our Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, which we thank you for, and we identified and gave awards for what we call Bright Future Awards to students who are studying or young professionals who are early in their professional journey in supply chain. So anyway,
folks like John Paxton,
thanks for that.
That will go from engineer to CEO or president.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and that's really
maybe so. Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
They're coming for your job, John.
That's great. Bring it on. They're a lot smarter than I am. I can tell you that.
Well, so one of the things I loved seeing this year, I didn't get a chance to sit in on it personally because we've been here, is the Women in Supply Chain panel session y'all had, and I'd love to get your take. Is that something you'd like to double down on as leader and continue to provide a platform and get the word out? One of the things we've heard from a variety of leaders, female leaders, I mean, you name it, even college students. One of the reasons why we have our full access series that spotlights exceptional female leaders is students or early professionals need to be able to see C-level female leaders, and it helps encourage and inspire and know that there's a path for them.
If you can see it, you can be it.
Yes,
right?
That's what we've heard that verbatim from a variety of folks. And to see what y'all did here was a great example and testimony to that. Is that something y'all want to do a lot more of in the years ahead?
Yes, we continue to work on the women in supply chain and also diversity in the supply chain. So those two areas, we recently published a U.S. impact study that was provided by Oxford Economics, and the data that they showed us still shows that we have ways to go.
That's right.
In those two areas. So as more women come into engineering, but it's not only engineering positions, it's all supply chain, marketing, and we want to have a platform that they can get together, they can make connections, and really develop and train, and we provide information to them so that they can advance their careers and gain the visibility within the supply chain.
And that's the critical piece, because that's where the numbers and the data, at least the data we've seen, is where you see the disparity. If you look at at least in supply chain, there's now more than 500 supply chain 4-year degrees, 2 degrees, technical degrees, you name it. The graduates coming out of those programs, it's really close to 50-50 in terms of the male-female breakdown. But then as you see the numbers start to progress through, and then, of course, up into the C-suite, that's when the disparity really shows itself, right?
Yeah.
So to hear what you just shared there, where you're providing these opportunities for all folks to advance their careers by making the connections, gathering the market intel, the industry intel, I mean, that's some of the secret sauce.
Yeah, and one of the things that recently we have a nominating committee that nominates people for our roundtable of industry leaders, and those are the people that provide the vision for the association. And we I'm very happy that we now have 2 female CEOs on our roundtable of industry leaders. Some people might look at that and say, why only 2? Other people might look and say, what took you so long? But I can tell you, if you look at it from a positive point of view, the idea is getting more diversity, and we'll continue to build that out.
It's a journey.
It's a journey, and you only start when you start, and in the end, but we're very happy that, and they are at C-level women in our supply chain industry, and they're part of our roundtable, which will continue to drive our activities.
Love that. That's great news. A journey. What's that Confucius saying? A journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first step, or something like that.
1,000 miles.
Yeah, there we go. That's
yeah.
All right, but I admire that. Love what you are doing. It's action. It's about action, and love how you are showing how it's done, and really setting the bar for many other associations out there that have very similar challenges, much like industry does. So appreciate what you're doing there, John, from a leadership standpoint. Okay, we want to make sure as we wrap up this interview, sitting here with John Paxton, COO and CEO Designate of MHI, how can folks not only connect with you, but how can they learn more about MHI?
Yeah, so there's several ways. The first thing is mhi.org is where you'll find, that's our website, and you'll find all the information of our industry groups there. You'll find connection, all our thought leadership information. We have just launched 5 new blogs on the topics of rack, overhead safety, overhead lifting, safe handling, and so those are actually up and running, and we continue to feed those. We just launched also a podcast series. Podcasts seem to be kind of cool these days.
Everybody's got one.
And then you'll find there too our video platform. So when I talk about the digital component, is serving up micro learning pieces, 3-minute videos where you watch it and you can learn the latest about the technology. So we continue to build that out. We have over 400 technology videos there. So that's on mhi.org. And then for people are looking, or if they could not make it to MODEX, or they didn't get, because the show's so big, they couldn't get to all the different booths.
Right.
This year, we took the entire MODEX show to a digital platform, and we taped every single booth here at the show. And then we'll launch, it's called modexshow.com, and there'll be a digital presence for the entire show. So this is specifically targeted on people who had travel restrictions, couldn't make it to the show, or people who have needs that come up later. They can access that. They can see the exhibitors. They can click down and see what happened at the show on all the booths. So those are 2 key areas of where you'll find our information going forward, and I encourage you to work with that and look through it. There's some really good stuff there.
I think they popped in and interviewed you for a second, Greg White.
I did, yeah. And hopefully I did us proud. We'll see. They wouldn't let me see the video, John. Who's hosting your podcast? Is it Daniel McKinnon?
Daniel is Carol Miller.
Oh, Carol.
Oh,
okay,
Carol.
okay.
Outstanding.
I think I may have seen one that Daniel was on. That's probably what it was.
Yeah. Okay, so much stuff going on, so many resources here that MHI provides. MHI.org. You can check out the blogs, the podcast, the video series, the MODEX show.
MODEXshow.com.
MODEXshow.com. The connect and get it. If you couldn't make it to Atlanta, you can check out a lot of folks that were here, because it is, even if you're in Atlanta, to your point, it's such a big show, filling up the entire Georgia World Congress Center, which is a massive facility. That gives you an idea of just how big it is.
Is it over? I know that the World Congress Center is like 2.4 million square feet. Is it? How much of that are we using here?
Yeah, so we're using about 400,000 square feet. So
okay.
we still got a ways to go, but
there's room to grow, John.
Yeah, and this year's show grew 30% over last year's show.
Wow, that's great.
So at 30% growth per year, you can get
take
there.
it. I'll take that.
You can get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
We're
Good
to
deal.
knock out some more walls.
That's right. Big thanks to our guests here today on Supply Chain Now. I really have enjoyed reconnecting with John Paxton, COO and CEO Designate for MHI. You can learn more at mhi.org. John, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. We're going to wrap up here momentarily. You bet. Greg, great interview. I love what
it's the
MHI
first time I've gotten
doing
to meet John, so I appreciate your time. I really appreciate the support for the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, and we're happy to provide this access and exposure for the attendees here at the show.
That's right. And
we'll glad to have you.
We'll probably be publishing about 12 or 14
Something
interviews.
Like that, yeah. I can't count.
Yeah,
I'm gonna need a day.
But a lot of technology, Geek Plus, Pro Glove, AccuSpeech, Mobile, Call Pass. You name it.
Too many to name.
Yeah, really too many to name.
We'll be naming over the next few days.
That's right. So, again, big thanks to John Paxton and the MHI team. To our listeners, be sure to check out upcoming events, replays of our interviews, you name it, at supplychainnowradio.com.
Yes,
find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. On behalf of the entire team, Greg, Clay, Amanda, you name it, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.